of screen engagement, and then contrast them with the profound real-world consequences they have on our human relationships. You know, we live in an era where the content we consume is literally scientifically engineered to hold our focus. But we have to ask, at what cost to our daily physical lives? That's the paradox we're untangling today.
So, let's dive right into this by asking the ultimate question about the friction between captivating storytelling and our modern media consumption. Are we the ones actually in control of the remote, the mouse, and the touchscreen? Or are the psychological hooks embedded in our digital media secretly steering our behavior? Well, the answer really lies in how our media is constructed from the ground up.
Section 1. Crafting the perfect story.
To really understand why screens are so addictive, we first need to look at how creators are taught to hook your attention right from the start. It all begins with the foundational architecture of storytelling itself. Screenwriting basics rely heavily on the classic three-act structure. It's a proven formula perfectly designed to build compelling tension and keep us invested in the protagonist's journey. The industry commonly summarizes this with a totally brilliant metaphor. Act 1, throw your character in the sea. This establishes the real world and introduces the hero. Act 2, surround him with sharks. This is where you raise the stakes, introduce obstacles, and build the core conflict. And finally, Act 3, pull him to safety, providing that satisfying climax and resolution. We are literally hardwired as human beings to sit and wait to see if that character makes it out of the water.
And seeing the difference between formats brilliantly illustrates how the medium dictates the pacing. Short films have to condense that structure by using visual shorthand to hook us instantly, rather than relying on heavy, drawn-out dialogue. Think about it. A feature film has the luxury of a 30-minute Act 1. You get slow builds, long exposition, you really get to settle in. But a short film? You only have about 5 minutes to throw that character into the sea. There's simply no time for a slow build, so creators use rapid visual cues to tell you exactly who the character is and what their world looks like in mere seconds. This highly accelerated pacing actually trains our brains to expect immediate gratification and constant, non-stop action.
Moving right along to Section 2. Mastering viewer retention.
But here's the thing, mastering the three-act structure just isn't enough anymore. To survive modern algorithms, creators are deploying a totally different set of psychological tricks designed specifically for the digital age. Look at the data. YouTube analytics show a massive cliff-like drop-off in audience retention the exact second a traditional video outro or summary begins. There's this mid-video sweet spot where viewers are completely locked in, having just received a really valuable piece of information. But the very moment a creator says something like, "in conclusion," or the summary music swells up, the viewer's brain recognizes that as an outro signal, and they instantly click away to go find their next dopamine hit. So to combat that massive drop-off, successful YouTubers use these specific steps to create what's known as a curiosity gap. They basically place an irresistible psychological hook right in the middle of the content. Instead of waiting for the end of the video, right at that mid-video peak engagement point, they implement this formula. First, they identify a problem you still have. Then, they promise a concrete solution. And finally, they tease it. For example, instead of just saying, "watch my next photography video," they'll say something like, "I'm going to reveal the one camera setting that instantly makes smartphone photos look like they were shot with a $3,000 DSLR. That gap between what you currently know and what they're promising, it's psychological dynamite. It literally forces you to keep watching.
All right, Section 3. Creative filmmaking solutions. Now, independent creators also use highly inventive, budget-friendly hacks to visually captivate us without breaking the bank, keeping our eyes absolutely glued to the screen through sheer ingenuity. For example, this genius piece of Reddit advice shows exactly how indie filmmakers can shoot a highly realistic blackout scene by simply wiring everything to one single switch. When a filmmaker is working on a tiny shoestring budget and needs to convey the sudden, terrifying absence of light, they don't need a massive Hollywood lighting rig. No way. They just plug all their practical lights into one surge protector strip and physically flip the switch right mid-scene. The result is an instant, absolute blackout that completely immerses the viewer in the tension. It's practical, it's cheap, and it perfectly manipulates our visual perception to keep us utterly hooked in the story.
Which brings us to Section 4, the digital addiction crisis.
So the absolutely crucial point here is that creators have completely mastered the art of visual engagement. But we really have to ask what happens to our real lives when we become a little too engaged. I mean, what's the fallout when the screen becomes far more compelling than the actual room we're sitting in? Well, peer-reviewed journals are extensively studying how excessive screen time destroys emotional bonds and basic communication within the family. The proliferation of digital devices at home is physically keeping us together in the same space, but emotionally it's tearing us apart. Family members are becoming mere cohabitants rather than a cohesive unit. Those shared experiences that traditionally build empathy and deep relationships are being rapidly supplanted by time spent in absolute isolation, just staring blankly at a screen.
Get this. A recent survey in the UK of 2,500 citizens found that an incredible 44% of people engage in what's being called zombie eating. That's letting digital notifications completely interrupt their family dinners. Think about that for a second. Nearly half of the respondents admit to sitting at the family dinner table, a place historically designed for intimate connection, and instead their faces are just buried in their phones. The notifications, the emails, the endless scroll of social media, it is all purposefully engineered to be more interesting than the real, live human beings sitting right across from you.
And what's even more tragic is that a full 33% of families sit in stagnant, sterile silence during meals. A third of families, they're completely losing the art of basic conversation. That represents homes with the fundamental human element of face-to-face interaction has essentially evaporated. Even further, 3 in 10 respondents reported they actually have problems even finding topics to talk about anymore. The social graces and the liberal education that used to fuel great, lively dinner discussions are literally being starved out by our addiction to simultaneity and digital immediacy.
So, Section 5, Reclaiming Human Connection. This all brings us to a critical crossroads. How do we break the spell of perfectly engineered digital retention to reclaim our real-world connections? How on earth do we fight back against the 3-act structures and those irresistible curiosity gaps? Well, as far back as 1890, the Locomotive Engineers Journal noted that true conversation requires effort, patience, and self-discipline. And that is a stark contrast to the impulsive immediacy of our screens. This brilliant quote highlights that real human connection isn't a passive activity like just watching a video. It requires us to actively listen, to moderate our ideas, and actually think before we speak. It demands a level of tranquility and reflection that our high-speed, notification-driven world actively tries to prevent. Reclaiming our family dinner tables means actively prioritizing this kind of deliberate, thoughtful effort over the super easy dopamine hit of a screen.
I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought. Now that you understand exactly how screens are meticulously designed to hijack your attention, will you actively choose to put the device down and truly talk to someone today? Because you know the tricks now. You know about the setups, you know about the sharks, the curiosity gaps, and the algorithm optimizations. The power is completely back in your hands. So take that effort, find some tranquility, and reclaim the lost art of human conversation. Thank you so much for